It's 1:30, and I think we've got a pretty good showing here. So I'll just start off because we have a lot to cover. I'm Charlie Zelle, and Chair of the Met Council and Chair of the Blue Line Extension Corridor Management Committee. It's great to see everybody again. I'm going to have a chance to introduce ourselves, but first, just a little quick housekeeping. Surprise, this is a virtual meeting. We're doing that under the governor's executive order. If there's members of the public who have any comment or questions, please feel free to email Sophia Guinness directly, and that's sophia.ginis@metrotransit.org, and we'll post your comments. You can make that any comments until June 18th, and we'll make sure that it's on the website. Also, just as a reminder, all the handouts, the PowerPoints, all that will be on the website, Blue Line EXT. That's one word, bluelineext.org. And just to start things off, why don't we introduce ourselves, and I will call out the organization or jurisdiction, and you can jump in with your name and what you represent. So how about Met Council members?
Eva Chambliss, District 2.
Anyone else here? Okay, Hennepin County.
Hey, Irene Fernando, Rail Authority Chair and Commissioner for District 2.
Oh, Anna Schmiel, Jeff Lundy will be here in a second, but I'm one of his policy aides, Commissioner Lundy's policy aides for District 1. Thanks.
Right, I know Jeff's coming. Thanks. See anyone else? All right, Brooklyn. Yeah. Brooklyn Park.
Hi, I'm Tanya West Hafner, Mayor Pro Tem for Brooklyn Park.
Welcome. Crystal.
Hi, I'm Jim Adams, Mayor of Crystal.
Welcome, Mayor. Robbinsdale.
Bill Blonigan, Mayor of Robbinsdale. I'm here. And I think George is here too.
George Selman, Robbinsdale City Council and Bill's alternate.
Right, George.
On this committee only.
That's a big shoes. Golden Valley.
Councilmember Jillian Rosenquist here, delegate for and sitting in on behalf of Mayor Shep Harris. He will be listening in, but he's in the car, so he's asked me to vote on his behalf.
Well, stay safe out there, Shep. Thank you. Minneapolis. Any representatives from the offices?
Hi, Andrea Patterson, policy aide for Councilmember Philippe Cunningham, Ward 4, Minneapolis.
Right. Anyone else? All right. Brooklyn Center. I see the mayor.
Hi, Mayor Mike Elliott here from Brooklyn Center.
Right. New Hope.
Kathy Hempkin, the mayor of New Hope.
I hope it's something less than 98 degrees than that picture you're sitting in.
No, it's not.
Maple Grove. All right, how about Osseo?
Hi, everyone. Alicia Vickerman, council member in Osseo.
All right, how about the Minneapolis Park Board?
Chris Meyer, Park Board, District 1.
Right. All right, now the Blue Line Coalition.
Good afternoon, everyone. Denise Butler here with ACER, African Career Education and Resource Inc.
Hi, Denise.
Representing the Blue Line Coalition. Thank you.
Right. And how about our Community Advisory Committee?
Jason Greenberg, co-chair of the Community Advisory Committee and Robbinsdale resident.
Right.
This is Tim Baylor, the chair of the Business Advisory Committee, Robbinsdale Chamber.
Hey, Tim. How about the Business Advisory Committee? That's
Good afternoon, everybody. Felicia Perry, co-chair of the Business Advisory Committee.
Alicia. All right, the MAC, Airports Commission.
Hello, Mr. Chair and everybody. Bridget Rafe, Vice President for Planning and Development with MAC, and happy to introduce Commissioner Crimmins, who is joining us as a MAC alternate. He's on the call today.
Oh, lovely. Great. Welcome. And
Thank you.
MnDOT.
Hi, I'm Mike Barnes. I'm MnDOT's Metro District Engineer.
Great. And thanks, Mike. And anyone from Metro Transit?
Wes Koistra, Metro Transit General Manager.
Hey, Wes. Thanks for joining. Okay, I think, did I miss anybody that would like to announce themselves? Oh, we're getting good at this.
This is Nicole Bueller for the Blue Line Coalition and Executive Director of the Harrison Neighborhood Association.
Hi, Nicole. Great, thanks.
And this is Danny. Apologies, I was a minute or two late, so I might have missed Minneapolis introductions. This is Danny Hans, the Senior Policy Aide for Minneapolis City Council Member Jeremiah Ellison, Ward 5.
Oh, great. Perfect. All right, last call. All right, so we're on to approval of the minutes. Actually, they were sent out in advance. It was the May 13th meeting. They were sent out on Monday. If there's any edits, you can let us know now, or let the staff know. And if not, I would like to have a motion and second to approve the minutes.
Hearing no call for amendment of the minutes, Mr. Blonigan of Robbinsdale moves to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Mayor?
Tanya West Hafner from Brooklyn Park will second the minutes.
Thank you. All right. Dawn, can you call the roll?
I can. Councilmember Chambliss?
Aye.
Commissioner Lundy? Commissioner Lundy?
Sorry, he's not on. I
Oh,
don't know.
okay.
I
Not
don't
yet.
think I have a-
Not yet. Okay. Commissioner Fernando?
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenquist?
Aye.
Mayor Blonigan?
Aye.
Mayor Adams?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem West Hafner?
Aye.
Mayor Elliott?
Aye.
Commissioner Chris Meyer?
Aye.
Denise Butler?
Aye.
Nicole Bueller?
Aye.
Bridget Reef?
Aye.
Mike Barnes?
Aye.
Jason Greenberg?
Aye.
Felicia Perry?
Aye.
And Chair Zelle.
Aye. Those minutes are approved. So before we get into the agenda, I want to touch on just a couple of good news items that that happened when the Federal Transit Administration released its annual report, and they made recommendations for rail, bus, rapid transit, and streetcar projects for the entire country. And there are actually 4 Minnesota projects, and I think the reason I mention it specifically is because I think they really give some confidence that these projects are moving forward and that the FTA has good confidence in what we're doing here in Minnesota. The Gold Line got $100 million. Southwest Light Rail got $100 million. Rochester BRT, $56 million. And most importantly, the Blue Line extension had a rating modification. I think they actually ended up, one of the big concerns is having us stay in the CIG Capital Investment Grant Program. And we are going to remain in the New Starts program in the engineering phase. They've actually kind of keeping the Blue Line in the engineering phase is really great news, because it means we don't have to, go backwards or start over. And they, in fact, even as I understand it, even kind of maybe made a new category for us called under review. So under review, when I was in high school, was bad news. It means the dean thought, do you really belong here? Well, I think this is quite the opposite. This is, you definitely belong here. And so I think we're really on track with what we've done so far. And clearly, I think they like what we're doing. So hats off to staff and to all the leaders who have come together to do what is a difficult mitigation, changing the alignment in such a significant way. But it is clearly recognized as a project that's had a long history and a lot of investments so far. So we want to build on that. And I think that's got a lot of credibility so far with our federal partners. And just as a word, those funding amounts I mentioned for the other lines, it isn't additional money on top of the existing budgets, but it's recommendations for authorizations and appropriations, meaning, they're living by their agreements and they're advancing the work, the funding. So I think that with this new administration, we can hopefully expect some of this funding and commitment to transit is going to continue. So,
Can I just jump in really quickly?
Yeah, please, Irene.
You might have all, for those listening in, I was clapping on mute and adding reactions, and want to even put a finer point on it. If it was not for the local investment and our shared residents really outlining the need and continuing and consistently expressing the demand and the requirement for this type of infrastructural investment, we wouldn't be where we are. And so just thank you all for the years and decades of advocacy and the tough votes and the difficult decisions that were made. And just want to express on behalf of the whole project team, and Met Council, everybody, just immense gratitude for how you all have led and partnered through this. And it's a very big deal how we were presented in the CIG, because that was one of our biggest concerns, right? The queue. And so thank you all for that. And just wanted to add that, Charlie. Thanks.
Thank you, Irene. And honestly, that local funding partnership, the staff has told me that directly, that really shows tremendous, commitment to these transit projects, which they don't normally see. And in fact, I think there's only 3 projects in the entire country that are in the engineering phase at this point. And one of them is the Gold Line, and then this line, and then one in Phoenix, which is much smaller. So let's not lose as much as we despair of our struggles, we're doing pretty well, so we should keep that momentum going. So let's jump to committee reports and hear from the Community Advisory Committee and the Business Advisory Committees. And we're going to hear, I think, Jason Greenberg, you're here, and followed by Felicia Perry, maybe to give your reports.
Thanks, Chair. So our previous meeting, we spent the bulk of the conversation talking about the anti-displacement group and the RFP that's coming and that was rolled out recently. And so just wanted to give some of the feedback from our discussions to the larger CMC on what's going on. So first of all, we did choose a representative from the CAC to be on the decision-making group. So going through the RFP, so we have someone from the CAC decided and an alternate that will be part of that group. And then there were some other things that we just wanted to make sure that the CMC was considering as we think about making a choice around the consultant or who we choose to the proposal that we move forward with. And so across the board, there's a preference to make sure that it's a local resource. We know we can't explicitly state that, but that just knowing that there is an overall preference for whoever is going to run the work group and handle this anti-displacement work, that it's a local resource. That from a timing perspective, this process is going to take a little while. And so ensuring that there are resources to help with displacement conversations prior to making this decision. That we ensure that the proposals received are putting their best effort towards complementing the technical work and the work that's going on in communities. So kind of early on before there are a lot of details. And then making sure that we do bring in local experiences to these conversations around anti-displacement. And then just making sure that we keep in mind that there will be compensation for whoever is leading the working groups, but that should also extend to the community members and the working group participants themselves. So not just the leadership of that, but also going down into the local communities. And that in a nutshell is a lot of items, but we spent a lot of time talking about it. So I wanted to make sure that we shared that from the CAC perspective to the larger group here. And I appreciate you giving me the time to share that.
Thanks, Jason. Felicia?
Thank you. All right, so from the Business Advisory Committee, we met on the 1st of June. Similar to Community Advisory Committee, we spent a bit of time going over the draft for the anti-displacement work group. So we got to see the draft request proposal. There was a lot of conversation around that. And similarly, there were concerns raised around folks around it feeling more like something that wasn't meant for local organizations to perhaps be working on. And so just really want to elevate those concerns around the desire of local organizations wanting to be a part of this and capable of building the different type of perhaps partnerships and coalitions needed to do it versus it sounding more like wanting to have an outside entity come and work on anti-displacement. So that was something that kind of came up. We also talked a bit about the feedback from engagement, the March and May engagement, and lastly, tapped a little bit around the station placement discussion. And yeah, some of the concerns around that conversation were also just really still having this need for specific data to make more informed decisions, both from our level as well as a community level, a desire from the community level to make more informed decisions about the routes and understanding a little bit more the impacts and wanting to know that now versus later.
Great, that's helpful feedback. And we're going to get into a lot of those issues here in a minute. Any other questions for our two committees from our committee members? All right, this is an important perspective, and it really helps kind of set up this next agenda item, really talking about the anti-displacement working group activities that we're engaged with. So Sam, I think you're going to lead us off, and then we'll hear from Kathy Gold as well. Sam?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'll ask Greg, I think, if we can put the presentation up, because I do have a few slides that talk about this. And I just also want to say thank you to Jason and Felicia, and I think captured very nicely the feedback we heard from our BAC and CAC members, very invaluable. And in fact, we've received some follow-up from that as well. But the themes that we take away from the conversations is just making sure that we are grounded in the local experience, because that really is where the knowledge is, and how best can we get that across with the work that we're proposing, and make sure that that's coming into the future work here. So Greg, if we can start on slide 7, that would be great. Appreciate it. So what I'd like to do for the corridor management team today is walk through a little bit of the aspects of the request for proposals, talk about our next steps, and Kathy Gold, as the chair mentioned, will also join me in this conversation and talk a little bit about the process Hennepin County is supporting and getting someone on board, and kind of the timeline on that. So just to set the table, and just as a reminder for folks, is we are looking for a third party to come in and help us navigate some of these discussions, help facilitate some of this work, and really manage the work of a working group. And I really got that embedded in my mind that this is a working group. This is not an advisory committee that's coming together to really kind of rehash or admire existing issues. It's really to get to the core of what we can do and recommend some anti-displacement policies and programs that can get us to some actionable recommendations. So this is the consultant's role in helping us convene, facilitate, and identify that work plan. So in terms of some of the characteristics or qualifications, if you will, for that consultant, that contractor to come on in, is that, again, what you've heard today from Felicia and from Jason and representing the CAC and BAC, is that they are a subject matter expert, and they're bringing that in. And then they can also really consult with communities in our neighborhoods and the groups that are doing a lot of this good work and moving the conversation forward. And then also working specifically not only with the project team, but with our advisory committees. And that's also one piece of feedback that we received from community members, is being more descriptive of what that looks like and what is the role of the BAC, the CAC, and the Corridor Management Committee, as well as Hennepin County Community Work Steering Committee, as we go through this work and where those lines of intersection. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of what we are looking for, it can be an individual that brings this expertise and skill set, or it can be a collection that really compromises or becomes a small team, if you will. So many individuals kind of coming together with different expertise, that's going to help. But really what we're looking for is this demonstrated knowledge and experience, and really also effectiveness. And I think that, again, what came out in the conversations we had with our advisory committees is that they are wedded to these issues of displacement and really understand them from multi-perspectives. And really what we're looking to do is understand it in different lenses, but with one of the strategies ensuring that we're building community wealth. That working with local communities and has a vested interest in supporting communities' perspective is also going to be key, as well as understanding the myriad of local agencies and state programs and community partners to kind of help us get to the core issues. Obviously, it would be a plus if folks understand sometimes the work that is done with sometimes complex infrastructure projects. That would be a plus. It's not required, but we just think that would be sort of a unique skill set to have. And understanding how to build communities that are vulnerable to displacement is going to be a key piece. And also, as we're still working with community members and businesses, and in a time where folks are very still conscientious about some of our getting together and gathering, making sure we can do it effectively and efficiently, both virtually and in person as needed. All right, next slide, please. So again, just sort of the areas that we see some of the kind of qualifications and skill sets resting. We are asking for a minimum of 10 years of experience and working in that local policy development. Again, very key in that local piece and really understanding the history, the issues, and how we've resolved or the barriers that continue to persist. So really coming in with that housing, economic, racial equity, and cultural competency piece right off the bat with that. And so we would also take a look at that experience, and it can be a combination of work experience and advanced education. Next slide, please. I won't go into a great deal of the tasks that we're asking of, but here are kind of the key pieces. And if folks have an opportunity to read the RFP and provide feedback, we're continuing to look for that. But really that project management and working group facilitation, kind of that task 1 and task 2, develop that work plan, and how is the work going to get done, and how is the working group really going to get to decision making? What is the process they're going to use for decision making, and how are they going to begin to develop those recommendations and key takeaways and bring that? Really tasks 3 and 4 is what's out there, really doing that economic market analysis and understanding where we have vulnerabilities in our communities and bringing in what has been done, why hasn't it worked, or what does work really well, both locally and that case study review. There are national examples. There are other areas that are doing really good work, kind of moving the needle in this area and bringing that into the conversation as well. And task 5 is really that community consult. How are we going to work with community members? How are we going to work with our existing advisory committee structure to really bring that knowledge and receive that as the working group does its work? And then really task 6 is the piece. It's the recommendations and implementation plan and coming together. There should be no surprises when that piece has come together because we've been engaging, we've been talking, we've been adding to the conversation. And then task 7 is just making sure that the materials are prepared in a way that are accessible to all of our community members. And we're also looking for making sure our materials are available in other languages. Next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about the communications of this RFP. So once the final RFP is available, the team has on its docket to make sure that we are letting basically everybody that we know, and we want everybody that know that this is out on the street as well, and that there's an opportunity to take advantage of this opportunity and be a part of the conversation. So we'll develop web and social media content for our advisory committees and the community engagement cohort to use, as well as project partners to share this availability. And then if we can go to slide 12, just as Felicia and Jason had shared with you, that we shared this with our BAC and CAC representatives. We did ask for a representative from both of those advisory committees to serve on the selection evaluation panel. So somebody that can join with us. Oh. If we can go to slide 12, please. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Greg. We'll just kind of catch everybody up here. So again, part of our intent is making sure that expanded voices are included in this work. Is CAC and BAC did select representatives, so Felicia will be joining us, as well as Kathy Frazier, who's a Brooklyn Park representative, as part of the evaluation. And as Jason mentioned, we also have alternates just in case something happens. And unfortunately, Felicia, Kathy cannot join us. We will also have an alternate from the BAC and CAC joining us as well. And then our next steps are just kind of a couple more slides here. And that is, we are asking all of our community members, business members, and folks around the table here to help us draft this. This is really our first take on what we should be doing, and we're looking to hear. And again, we're hearing some really great feedback and really good things for us to challenge ourselves a little bit in this work. And so if we can move to slide 13, you'll just see a little bit of kind of two major dates, and then Kathy Goldar will go through a little bit more of a finer tooth of the process here. But we're asking for any comments that you have, anything that you think is needed in there or needs to be strengthened, please connect with me. My email is there, and I'd love to hear from you. And we are beginning to hear things, like I've said, and really good things. And then ultimately, we will be taking that comments back and ideas, bring that together, release a final RFP on June 28th, and again, follow up with the communications to make sure everybody's aware that it's out on the street. So I know we'll have good discussion on this, but before that, Chair, if we could just turn this over to Kathy Gold, and she can just outline a little bit more of our next steps and RFP timeline.
Great. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Sam. So if we can advance to the next slide, please. And here's our request for proposal timeline. Back in a few days ago, and maybe a week ago or so, May 28th, the request for proposal materials were sent to stakeholders for an initial review. We then met on June 1st and June 2nd with our BAC and CAC, as well as our cohort, and today here with you on June 10th to present an overview of the request for proposal. As Sam said, on June 24th, we're looking for feedback, and so we'd like to collect all that feedback from everyone at that time to then send out the proposal for solicitation on June 28th. We plan on having a pre-bid meeting on July 12th, and then proposals due on July 27th. Having our evaluation and decision making on those proposals July 29th through 30th. And then we go into our formal board action request process on August 3rd. We communicate to the board. On August 10th, we present it to the Public Works Committee. And August 17th, if the board should approve, it would approve on that date. In conjunction with that timeline of August 3rd through the 17th, we will also be in our preliminary negotiations and going through our internal contracting process. And then hopefully by August 27th, we have a product to go out to the vendor for execution in contract form. And on August 26th, getting that back for our final execution within the county. So on August 17th, we would send that out to the vendor for their execution. August 26th, then I proposed that we'd have it back from the county executed. And then in early September, getting the vendor on board and calendaring initial meetings. So that's kind of a snapshot of the timeline that we anticipate for this request for proposal. And with that, Sam, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. Chair, so that's the update that we wanted to share to the Corridor Management Committee, and I know some folks might have some ideas, some thoughts, and comments as well.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kathy, and thank everybody for engaging in this process, especially as Commissioner Fernando says, the CAC and the BAC, we've already heard comments from Jason and Alicia that this is an important subject and we really want to get it right. And I understand, and it's really helpful to have the transparency of the schedule, of the process as much as possible. Also that it's a pretty comprehensive process. But before we move on, I invite any additional comments about how we're setting this up or any questions on what Sam and Kathy just presented.
All right, Mr. Chair, this is Mayor Elliott.
Yeah, hi, Mayor. Go ahead.
Okay. I want to say thank you. I think that this process that's laid out, to me, represents I think a process that will hopefully get us to some real policies that we can move forward on in terms of addressing disparities in transportation projects like these, and addressing the particularly the question of displacement, both hopefully residential and commercial, and help move us to a more inclusive project. And so, I'm, I think well pleased to see this presentation and hear, how we're moving forward. So I applaud your leadership, Mr. Chair, on this, and all of our partners that are working together to make sure that we're creating a new narrative here for Minnesota in terms of equity and inclusion. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I really think, and I just sense this group here especially, we're really aligned on making that kind of structural shifts and change and doing it right. And but it's not easy. So we know that for some this is going to be a kind of fast, for some slow, and when we get really into the substance, the devil's in the details. So we just gotta be prepared for those that tension. And if it isn't and if it wasn't difficult, maybe it's not worth doing. So we're kind of having our heads up, and we're gonna make progress. I really believe that's true. So thank you, and stay tuned. We're gonna hear now a little summary of the engagement feedback from Sophia Guinness. This is really an overview of what we received from March through May, and as you all know from our last meetings, we were really in the process, but I think now Sophia has something to report. So, Sophia?
Thank you, Chair Zelle and committee members. Greg, if you could advance the slide. So as everybody is very, very aware, in March, we began kind of the discussion of these new route options. And kind of right now, kind of coming back with what we've heard through the May timeframe. And that doesn't mean that we're done asking questions and engaging the community. We just anticipate in the next month, we will be updating the technical conversation to kind of go in parallel with our anti-displacement work. So really taking a moment to take in all that we've heard and make sure that it is now incorporated into our project and influencing the next set of things that we'll be discussing with all of you. So if you could advance the slide, please. To kind of ground everybody in what I'll show next, I want to kind of remind everybody about what we've been asking the community in these last few months. And so we're asking about issues and opportunities that folks saw along these proposed routes. And in the interactive map, people could put, very site-specific examples of what they wanted us to consider. We were asking about the routes themselves and if there was any potential missing options. Did we get it right? What were folks thinking? We asked folks to comment on our project goals, which is super helpful because then we can take that into the project objectives and then overall the evaluation matrix that we'll report on later this year to help talk about the project itself. Talked a little bit about preliminary design preferences and then potential station locations. We've got a lot of feedback of major destinations that people wanted to reach. And then also on the interactive map, you could literally place a dot of where you would want to see a station in some of those locations that we don't have them placed. Next slide, please. So kind of what we're doing now is that we anticipate having a full report in July. And all that's doing is giving some of our community consultants time to enter some paper surveys. We got a lot of responses, and the in paper is sometimes the best way to go. So just needed a little bit of time, but also just really want to emphasize that as we've been receiving feedback from day one, it's not like we just looked at these in May and are like, what did we hear? Right? No, we've been looking at this the whole time and pulling that into the project. And now we're just kind of doing that formal check and responding to major themes that came out and all of that stuff. So giving a little bit of time to kind of get those last results in, but I will report on all of the preliminary things today. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of overall summary, and then I'll go into some of the specific places where we got engagement. So we had over 60 events in the community, reaching over 2,000 people. And that's not including some of our virtual events were recorded and people could check back online later. You know, I look at our YouTube ticking up, and that 2,000 people, you know, maybe watched it later, right? And same with some of our Facebook Live events that we did with Encouraging Leaders or Commissioner Lundy. You know, people tuned in later and watched the recording. So that 2,000 was just the initial, and the virtual world actually lets us reach people after some of the events that we've had. We had over 1,600 responses to the survey. We still, like I mentioned, have some paper surveys being tabulated. And those paper surveys are often, you know, reaching very wide demographics and being very intentional about reaching all aspects of our community. The interactive map had over 500 comments, very robust discussion on it. People could actually reply to each other as well. About 23 people said, I don't like those forms, here's just my comments. Maybe I have something to attach. And then, you know, throughout this time, we've been getting tons of phone calls and just people wanting to have questions and engage. So not necessarily providing a formal comment, but just wanting to talk to project staff and have questions answered. Next slide, please. So March through May, we're very busy in May. And I like to joke that we traded calendars, right, to make sure that we could be as many places as possible. And this slide could have had even more. I just fit as many as could fit on a slide. And really also appreciate the whole project team because as you see, Dan was out at one of the Liberian Association business meeting, and Sam did a Talk Out Loud Facebook Live event. And you know, that really engaging conversation with all of that. So a lot of events out and about. We really want to continue to reach more people and being where people are, and also the community cohort and the events that they've hosted really has helped us reach a lot of people, and we will continue that effort in the summer months and months to come. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides that I have are just kind of breaking down what we heard on the interactive map to give people an overall flavor of just some of the summary totals. And so if you all played around with the interactive map, you could kind of see the whole thing kind of zoomed out, or you could select an area and zoom in. And so people did both. And so the overall map had about 130 comments. You can kind of see the distribution of folks going to those issues, opportunities, and station locations. In Area 1, there was less comments, you know, but Area 1's more known, right? That's in our Brooklyn Park area. So some of the desired station locations where people just, one person I think decided to go up and down the line and just confirm the stations that were already placed on that map. Next slide, please. In areas 2 and 3, you see a similar breakdown of people kind of engaging on those options. And so a lot of robust data on where folks would like to see stations, which Nick will reflect in a little bit more detail when he gets later in his presentation. Next slide, please. So kind of drilling down onto, you know, what were these site-specific issues and opportunities that people brought up. And, you know, this came in through various ways, but, you know, also to the interactive map. A lot of comments about supporting businesses during construction and that wealth building and bringing funding mechanisms into community. A lot of desired destination of people pointing out community assets. We also heard a lot about kind of how parking or pedestrian features would work. Next slide. I'm going to talk in the slide subsequent more about the Area 3, but also want to get on to our Area 2 and make sure we're highlighting that. And so some of the things that came out specifically about County Road 1 or Botno Boulevard is people talking about the ease of access, reaching the light rail, a lot about the ped and bike elements, as well as in just, you know, safety of crossings and kind of that picture, and not in the green space, people mentioning the green space and how all of that could work. And then questions about traffic and minimizing impacts to traffic operations. Next slide, please. So going to the survey specifically, and also then what people kind of sent comments in, and was kind of, what about this route? So I would say of everything that we've shown, we've heard both support and concern. So, and a lot of the concern is, you know, tell me more. And is specifically also some of the things that were highlighted multiple times as construction impacts and the kind of the support that could come with construction, how LRT fits, right? What does it look like? And so I think our next conversation speaks right to that one of starting to show what we're talking about instead of just lines on a map, because lines on a map, while a useful starting tool for conversation, are kind of difficult to actually get into the details with. A little bit specifically to area 3, you know, we asked kind of people, frame the question as like, which would you most like to see advanced in terms of Lowry and West Broadway? And I got asked in another committee, is this like voting? Do we take these comments as, you know, kind of law of which way we should go? And no, right, it's a snapshot to start to see that initial reaction from folks, because we have a lot more information that we have to share before we get a decision. It just starts to give a barometer of what people are thinking about. And kind of where comments are going. So about 1,000 people expressed support for seeing some form of light rail on West Broadway, and about 500 in support of something on Lowry. We also had folks that just weren't ready to make a call yet. If you go to the next slide. Kind of breaks it out a little bit. So the previous slide also included a little bit of just kind of general comments received from folks expressing, and this is specific to the survey. But the survey also, you know, asked, do people need more time, or do they have something else they want to share? Next slide. Kind of why were people picking these preferences? So a little bit of examples from both. So when folks cited West Broadway, it was often thinking that it provided the most access, especially to the business district within North Minneapolis. Lowry, some of the places that were often cited were the Upper Harbor Terminal, folks wondering if there was wider roads and potentially different kinds of disruption. Overall, some of the themes that came through were wanting to reach kind of high density places, maximize ridership, and kind of what route would most support equity, what route is the most equitable, and would serve the most people underserved by transit. And also kind of that question of which one connects most people to jobs. Is there a difference? How does that work? So that was part of the top preferences and what people were trying to kind of explain as they want us to evaluate going forward. Next slide, please. So part of that, is anything missing? And so we did receive a few comments to that effect, and I kind of split it down into two categories. One's were people actually advocating for us to move forward with an option, and the other one was just kind of like, why isn't this being shown? Why isn't this on the table right now? So we got the suggestion that on West Broadway, that kind of a street that's right north of West Broadway, turning that into a transit mall for a portion and having our train go down that, or a little bit more advocacy of, I think the committee might have remembered the discussion of if you were going all the way to Lowry, could you connect via Lyndale versus Washington on the other side of the river? And so some folks saying, hey, maybe just look a little bit more on staying on the west side of the river instead of being on east, and also suggesting 3rd Street as an option. So I'd say for both of these, you know, it wasn't like an overwhelming swell, but just some very passionate folks really asking us to look more into these two things. And so we will formally respond and kind of talk about that more. In terms of the other kind of things that we heard, a little bit of like, especially as we get to the north, like, why didn't you look at 169? And then quite a few questions about kind of the Highway 55 to Highway 100, which I think we brought to the committee before, kind of why the project team wasn't recommending to move forward with that option, but just reflecting that we did hear quite a few questions about that as we went forward. Next slide. The project goals and asking about them are important because it'll help shape how we evaluate the project itself. And overall, we had pretty positive feedback overall, people saying, yep, those project goals sound pretty good. About 600 people gave specific, you know, input to how they could be shaped further, especially as we develop the next level of items. We did ask folks kind of to state their top 3 preferences and what was most important, and this is kind of how it came out. So 62% of folks kind of picked improving transit access and connection to jobs as kind of their most important thing. Did another almost 50% of folks, really wanting us to make sure that we're prioritizing advancing local and regional equity and reducing racial disparities, and then also just improving our transit service, the frequency and reliability. Next slide. So a little bit of, those 600 comments of what people were asking us to drill more into. So here's a few examples. So having, walkable areas where people see and use transit, kind of that equitable approach, and that transit experience. We heard a bunch of that. So folks wanting us to think about that as we kind of evaluate what we're going to advance. Next slide. And with that, Chair Zelle, I will turn it back to you for any questions or other feedback folks that folks want to share.
Thanks, Sophia. And honestly, that is a very robust process. I'm completely impressed that there's the number of kind of contacts and in so many different ways, using technology and paper, phone calls, even those people who aren't answering the questions that just want to make a comment, and I'm probably one of those people. I really appreciate that. I think that this is clearly a step in the process. We're going to be engaging all along, as you mentioned. We're going to have more to report on in July, but probably a lot more activity in July as well. Let's just pause for a minute. Any questions, thoughts at this point from any of the committee members?
Chair Zelle, Bill Blonigan. Eventually, after everybody gives their thoughts, I just have a comment about what Robbinsdale citizens are thinking.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can share that now if you'd like.
Well, we're not getting the same kind of positive reinforcement that we just had reported to us. And at this point, I think there's 3 city council members that are not optimistic that Robbinsdale will grant municipal consent. In fact, right now, I think it's more likely than not that Robbinsdale won't grant municipal consent. We've gone as Robbinsdale citizens from the #1 slam dunk cheerleader of this Blue Line extension to the disappointed, should we just settle for a third best option city? Our experience is that Robbinsdale citizens overwhelmingly believe that light rail should travel through the rail corridor that was put in place in Robbinsdale in 1880. And for decades, the plan has been to put the Blue Line extension through Robbinsdale on the rail corridor. So while I can understand the governor's position that the rail corridor is not feasible, it's becoming clear to us on the city council, I think, that any other alignment's a distant second or third, and it might be too disruptive for city approval. I wish that there was a way to re-engage the railroad or corporate Berkshire to explore co-location like they repetitively said in the past that they would do. And we are open to seeing the work of the designers, the sooner the better. But I think people should understand that Robbinsdale can't just settle for a project that the region loves and tears Robbinsdale in half. And finally, I hope you all know how much we respect the extremely competent, dedicated, and hardworking people on this call and within your various organizations. It does really pain us to give you this news, but I hope you can also understand how Robbinsdale citizens and businesses need to have a project that doesn't tear us in half. So I wish I had more encouraging news, and thanks for listening to us.
Well, Mayor, I appreciate your candor, and it's never too early or too late to express whatever concern, and particularly as you mentioned, the sense of feeling torn in two is really strong, and we will want to kind of keep this conversation going and understand what we have within our power and what we don't. And I think we all agree we want to keep the project alive and with as least negative impacts as possible. So I think it's appreciate you're sharing it. Any other thoughts or initial kind of not necessarily on that issue, but just generally on the
Chair,
engagement process? Yeah,
Chair, this
Dan.
is Dan. I just, you know, we 6 months of 20, how we engage public engagement and how we attack different things, you know, coming out of a very challenging 2020. And I think we're very excited about hopefully moving into the second half of 2021, doing something that we haven't done in a while, and that's get together with some in-person requests and some in-person meetings and some in-person engagement and dialogue. And so we're real excited about that. And to follow up on Mayor Blonigan's comments, you know, one of the spots where we've got a number of in-person opportunities is in the city of Robbinsdale. And again, not to necessarily go about the business of trying to convince Robbinsdale residents or businesses why this may be better than what was on the railroad, but at least to answer questions, show drawings, show diagrams, and to be forthright on what it can mean and would mean for the city of Robbinsdale, as well as Brooklyn Park, Crystal, Minneapolis, and other areas along this entire alignment. So again, the more we're able to put exhibits together, the more we're able to get out in the field and point to things and look at things and measure things and really, you know, look together at maps and such over the next several months. We'll start to bring a lot of that forward. And so I appreciate the mayor's comments. Our team is working hard, both Met Council and Hennepin County together, to really get this information, get questions answered, and get out in front of what this can mean and what impacts and benefits it can bring.
Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate that's true. And like you say, this is more conversations, more kind of fact sharing, getting kind of into the nitty gritty, and doing it in person is going to be, and that sounds like we're going to have more and more opportunities this summer to do that. That should really help. And if I can see another picture of you dressed up in a suit and tie, I'm thinking like, my God, you know, Dan Scholler will do anything. So that's
Doesn't
good.
happen often. Not only was I in a suit and tie, but I wasn't in my kitchen, and that's a big deal. If
well, you know, you've moved into the living room, so things change. Well, seriously, I think that this July, I know that Commissioner Lundy is going to have some driveway meetings. I think not Mayor, Councilmember Chambliss, I'm looking at Riva here, is hosting a listening session coming up. And I think these face-to-face conversations too, and virtual, will all be helpful. And if anybody has any ideas, wants to participate, wants to lead a conversation, feel free to reach out to any one of us on the staff, the Hennepin County or Met Council, and we'll help make that happen. And again, Mayor and Robbinsdale, let's just set up some times to have that conversation with your fellow council members, because I think you know, you're right to press the red button, and it means we gotta, like, let's be honest about where things are and how we can, what the lay of the land is.
So Chair, Chair Zelle.
Yep.
George from Robbinsdale.
Oh, sure. Hi, George.
Just to follow up on Bill's very eloquent and great comments. I won't be nearly as eloquent, I'm sure. You know, I've been a cheerleader for this project for going back to probably when some of the people on the project team were in college, and maybe earlier. But you know, and I fought very hard for what we narrowed down to the rail corridor that Bill decided or described. After all that, I got to tell you, I flip-flopped, and I am adamantly opposed to the current alignment. I feel like it's been run right down Robbinsdale's throat. I'm not saying that was anyone's intention. I know everybody well enough to know I'd not believe that, but the citizens don't. There's a groundswell of opposition to this. I'm telling Bill pressed the red button, and I'm pounding on it It's not going to go on Botno Boulevard through Robbinsdale if there's anything I can do to stop it. And I hate saying that. And I want LRT in Robbinsdale, but I do not want it there elevated. I don't want it there at grade. I don't care what side of the road it's on. It'll cut this city in half, and it'll stay cut in half for the next 100 years. And that's unacceptable to me.
Okay, I understand. I heard that. At this point, does anybody else have any red buttons to push?
This
All right,
is
we're gonna.
Tanya West Hafner. I just had a quick question to make sure that I was not hearing. I think I was hearing something incorrectly, that they were talking about the other side of the river. And I think they meant the other side of the freeway when she was giving her description about Washington versus running it up Lindale to
I think
Lowry.
that's right.
Is that
That
right?
is right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. I'm like, wait a minute, that's way too far in the other direction. So yeah, obviously we have a lot invested in this. You know, we'll have 4 stops potentially in Brooklyn Park. One thing that other reason that I sort of popped on is that I just wanted to, you know, give a little bit of I don't know, I'm not going to be very eloquent about this, but I was physically in the hospital in North Memorial Hospital in 2014 when the Green Line opened. And so there was a lot of nurses and people talking about the line and the lineup and stuff. And a lot of them, you know, I was a patient there, right? Like they were helping me. And a lot of them, and especially a lot of the nurses' aides, said that it would be incredibly beneficial to them to have a stop. So when it went into the corridor, the railroad corridor, and bypassed the hospital completely, I have to tell you that having been a patient there, I think, you know, that's a huge job source for you guys. And I think maybe think about it that way, and maybe do what everybody else is doing, which is ask for more stuff. Like maybe you guys ask for 2 stops or move the stop away from the, you know, that main entrance and get a stop at the hospital end, maybe in the middle of between there and the Lakeland Drive or something instead. I mean, I wanted you guys to know how much I heard as a patient, how beneficial having a stop at the hospital would be. And I'm not discounting your trepidation at all, with it sort of coming down 81 there. So I don't want you to think that. I just want to pass on what I heard from the nurses and the nurses' aides and all the other people that were working there at the time I was actually in there. So thank you for listening.
Thanks for the comment. Oh, well, at this point,
Charlie, before we go on, I want to just acknowledge Jillian put a note in the chat, and so for folks' reference, and I want to acknowledge that we've been having some discussions with City of Golden Valley, and those will continue about the topics that she has identified. So don't mean to call you out, Councilmember Rosenquist, but wanted to make sure that the chair had saw what you put in there, and to acknowledge that those are parts of what we're working on as well.
Thanks very much. Yes, I didn't want to sidetrack the discussion, but wanted to make sure that folks knew that we were working on Highway 55 bus issues, and that we're always advocating for. While we're disappointed it's not going to be in Golden Valley, those identified needs I know are important to everybody here. We've got differently abled people, we've got mobility issues, we've got other kinds of things, and they were identified in the past decade, and we want to make sure that we're serving them as they need with transit connections. Thanks.
really appreciate that comment. And yeah, now I have the chat opened up. I read that. Jillian, I also think it really highlights that all this transit connectivity is just that connectivity. It's not just one line. And this kind of network that can kind of establish a connection to Golden Valley is really key. And even though this alignment might look different than it did initially, and I know we could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about not my favorite railroad. So go ahead.
I'll make it real quick. I finally got my phone in the queue. This is Commissioner Lundy. I had to dial in.
Hi, Jeff.
Just wanted to address the that we are continuing, and for, Mayor Blonigan and the rest of the Robbinsdale Council, Councilmember Selman, continuing to rack up probably 1 to 2 driveway meetings a week. We've got the calendar that we shared out with everyone. I think that we are continuing to fill them up rapidly, and people have been reaching out to set up these driveways, to have conversations about the rail, to share what they like, don't like. And so I just want to make sure the Robbinsdale Council saw Anna's email with the calendar, and then we'll keep updating that as we go. We'll let the Robbinsdale Council decide, the who's and whens for quorum purposes. But, we're approaching, we'll probably have 20 by the end of next week. We'll keep racking them up. So lots of engagement opportunities, lots of questions. So we'll keep you guys in the loop and invite you to every single one of them.
Jeff, thank you. That's really impressive. 20 or more. That's, and I think that's what it'll take. This is not broadcast. This is kind of, driveway by driveway and community, neighborhood by neighborhood conversations. So really appreciate your putting yourself out there. And I really invite others who cannot both attend or host or co-host. That'd be really great. And I think July and August, these will be months to really do a lot. And I think one of the things I think certainly have learned is when it comes to engagement, we can invite people. We can also go to where people are. So what are those events happening where people are gathering anyway, and there are opportunities to kind of create ways to connect. Okay, so I want to make sure we have time to hear from Nick Landwer coming up on our next on our agenda, LRT Station Placement. We've certainly been starting to talk about this. Last meeting, we got a pretty good overview about the different kind of applications, different kind of urban areas, neighborhood areas, mixed use, single family. I mean, there's a lot of kind of areas that light rail goes through, and they take different kind of treatments. So that was a good broad overview. Now I think we're gonna hear about actual ideas where they technically can go into this proper allocation, knowing that all we've been talking about, as much as we love our engineers and our scientists, this is a human process and more of an art. But Nick, I really appreciate your presenting, because this is kind of the confluence of the technical expertise and the kind of community kind of connection that we've been learning about. So take it away, Nick.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. The Chair is right. This really is a process. We're making sure that we're getting the input, the involvement, and we're working with our project partners. And really want to talk about some of the process that we're going through and doing now as we'll be rolling out stations here in the very near future. So with that, can we go to the next slide, please, Greg? All right, so this is a little bit of a grounding slide, looking at the previous alignment as well as the route options that we are evaluating right now. And in that gold, again, you can see where the previous route that was along BNSF and then along Highway 55 where there were 7 stations that were affected by the route change. The 4 stations up in Brooklyn Park along West Broadway, they're still viable. They're still in a great location and supported, I think, as Sophia even mentioned from some of the feedback we're hearing. But as we go down the map and look at things, there's the stations at 63rd, at Bassick Road, the station we had in Robbinsdale, Golden Valley Road, the Plymouth Avenue Theodore Worth Park Station, and then we had 2 stations along Highway 55 at Penn Avenue and Van Wyck Boulevard. So it's the 7 stations that we're looking at that are being effective, and how can we continue to meet the needs for the community as we're looking at route options. So next slide, please. So as we look at the route, it's pretty clear that, again, that up in that segment 1 in Brooklyn Park, that we would continue with the 4 stations there. But as we also look at the map and just how close the County Road 81 route is to the railroad corridor, especially in Crystal area, we're recommending to continue with the 63rd area, 63rd Avenue Station area, and also continue to look at Bass Lake Road stations. I think we've talked about this and alluded to that in the past. As we're looking in downtown Robbinsdale, there's starting to be a little bit more of a divergence from the rail, but we want to keep that commitment to serve the downtown. So we'll continue to work with the city and the staff as we look at designs to determine that best location for a station in the downtown area that would serve Robbinsdale. But then as what's also brought up here is with our new destination or new opportunity for a destination of North Memorial, it looks like that North Memorial area would be a very good candidate for a station. As we start going more into getting the feedback from the community and have more options here in Minneapolis area, we're going to need we're pulling together the input. We're working with our project partners, and we will be coming out with some recommended stations and locations to look at along those routes going forward. So next slide, please. So from the community, from our interactive map that and community input that Sophia had mentioned before, these two maps here are maps with dots on there that show the interest in station locations that came from that public input. So the smaller map meant that there was fewer recommendations for a station in these locations, and the larger means there were more people that request them. But we can start seeing some of the patterns fall out into place as we look at these locations and desired destinations by the community. And what we're going to be doing here is evaluating these locations as we work with our project partners here and determine based on some of the selection criteria. So next slide, please. So the considerations we look at as we're placing the stations are obviously key here. As we look at the last map, we want the stakeholder and community input, where the community thinks that they're best served with the station and location. We'll look at key destinations along that route. For example, North Memorial was a key destination, but as we go down the alignments, where are the transit connections? Where are the businesses? Where are the schools? Where are the parks? Where is the higher density of the population, the ridership that's going to be on it? We're also going to look at where's the available right of way for that station area and location, to make sure that we can limit impacts to the community. And then we'll also look at both the existing development in those locations, but the potential future development needs and desires and plans for these areas. So these are all going into the consideration, the evaluation as we're working with our project partners to hone this in. As a reminder, as we place these stations, this is a rapid transit. It is light rail, so we tend not to have a stop every block along the alignment, but really a good spacing, especially when we're in a more urban area, is that half mile to as we get a little bit farther, that mile spacing. So we want to have stops that are convenient, but that we're not stopping all the time, but we want to make sure that we're serving the community and the destinations that are needed. Next slide, please. So as we're working through this, there's three different components to that station location. What this diagram is really talking about is we have a platform. That's the smaller gray area. The little bit larger rectangle that is the site in that area. So we take into consideration, we're placing a platform, but it starts affecting the area around it, that site area. But we also have station area planning going around in at least a half mile radius, looking at the area, looking at what the impacts are, looking at what the opportunities are in that area. So this is just kind of to show that we're looking at more than just a station. We're looking at an area as we're placing these. Next slide, please. Some of the elements that we'll go through and really want to make sure that we're paying attention to in the placement of the stations and going into the design of the stations is the elements, the pedestrian access. You know, the key thing is safety for our riders, our patrons, that make sure that they can get conveniently and safely to a station and from a station, and we want to take that into consideration on our placement. We want to make sure that there's adequate bike facilities, so folks that are going to ride a station can, you know, either, you know, park and lock out their bike, or they can get their bike to a station. We want to make sure that there's appropriate wayfinding, so you know that, you know, if there's not a center platform or there's split platforms, that we're getting to that station and where those amenities are going from there. You know, we also take and work with the project partners in that area on landscaping and making sure that the station is comfortable and nice, convenient for the community. Want to definitely make sure that we're taking the opportunity and maximizing our bus facilities and those connections along the alignment. We take a look at, you know, how do passengers, you know, if they're not riding or walking, you know, if they're getting dropped off, where those sites could be for a drop off. And in some locations, you know, for instance, at 63rd, where there is an existing park and ride, but do we need a park and ride near a station, and what's the evaluation that we go through and the plans for that. And then there's a whole list of other things like stormwater BMPs and best management practices and the connecting road infrastructure around us. So next slide, please. This is an example drawing of some of that station area evaluation and how we've looked at it in the past. And this is actually the station at Brooklyn Boulevard in Maple Grove. So this is one of those stations up in Area 1 that we've already come a long ways on. We're at 90% design on. So as we're going through some of those considerations and elements and parts of that planning, you can see that this station here, we have access from both ends of that station. So the station is the yellow long rectangle in the middle of between those intersections and labeled Brooklyn Boulevard Station. But then you can see the gray, the ramps that go up to the station for access. So, you know, we have access from both signalized intersections to that station platform, so we can get people there safely and conveniently. We take a look at design these intersections, and we design the pedestrian experience here. In this location, we really looked at narrowing up that road as much as we could, so we really limit that pedestrian exposure to the traffic as they're going to the station. So we take that kind of stuff into consideration and make sure that there's the appropriate facilities for pedestrians, like push buttons, so they can get the recall the signal for the pedestrian to walk across and get across the street, and also have, you know, intermediate buttons in the middle so they can push it if they only got halfway across. Also, we want to look at in here towards the left-hand side of the screen. You can see on either side of the road there's the T. So we look at how we place those bus stations so those transfers and bus stops can be convenient and work well along with the station area. What's a little bit harder to see in this example, but near those T's, the bus stops that you can see, we've also identified and we work and reach out to some of the property owners around there, or look at where the opportunities are for potential passenger drop-offs in these areas. So we've identified, you know, some locations where folks can either drop off a person that's going to the station or wait for them as they're coming from the train station to bring them to the end of their destination. So these are some of the key factors and elements that we're going to be looking at here and rolling out here in the very, very near future. Our recommendations for the remaining station area locations for the routes that we've identified and proposed. So next slide, please. So with that, Chair, that's the end of my presentation, but I'm willing to answer any questions and And, hopefully, again, this is a process that we go through. We want to make sure that everybody's included in it. We're hearing where folks want to be. We're working with our project partners so we can, come up with a good product that can be supported by the community.
Thanks, Nick. And I really appreciate now you're describing not just locations, but kind of areas that have service. And this is more iterative about listening and getting reactions, and we'll learn more next month. Any questions, comments from the committee at this point? Well, hearing none, thanks, Nick. I know we're going to get a little bit more fine-tuned as we come along, and I really appreciate that not all stations look alike, and they serve different kinds of areas. So thank you. We have just a couple of more items on the agenda. One is I just want to report quickly on the idea of a committee membership, just for your consideration. I really appreciate the conversation, and we spent a lot of time a couple of months ago kind of talking about voting versus non-voting on the committee, and I also, we continue those conversations kind of offline. I know that a number of people have contacted me, and we've had when I think we've kind of opened up a lot of different in a way contradictory issues. So it's kind of my recommendation, because we're coming up close to the time frame where we had committed to reconsider the membership when we have a community supported alignment kind of nailed down, that we kind of just take a pause and take this up at that time, since we're months away. And I really appreciate everybody's interest. Most importantly, and I will just kind of reiterate what I've said all along, this is a very inclusive table. And so no ideas, thoughts, information, or input is off the table, no matter how one comes to this table, whether you vote or not. So I think let's just kind of keep this going. If people want to keep talking to me about it, I'm happy to take your call. And the most important thing, I think we got to stay on our principles that we've really laid out, and I think we broadly agreed. And I think every meeting has really honest and good, candid, sharing of information. I certainly encourage that, and we have a lot more work to do. Our next meeting is in July, so that's going to be pushed forward. I think we announced that last month, but we're pushing it forward from our normal time frame for the first week to Thursday, July 15th. So check your calendars, make sure it's not the second Thursday, but the third Thursday. That's only because we were kind of in a holiday period, and we were a little bit concerned about people's time. And we all deserve a vacation, so I encourage you to take a vacation, and maybe we can get away from the screen every so often this summer. And maybe it won't be 99 out. So again, that meeting, July 15th, 1:30 to 3, and it'll be here before you know it. And that's all I have. I really appreciate everybody staying tuned in, really showing up at these meetings, sharing your thoughts, participating in the committee meetings, and certainly in all these engagement activities that will really be kind of in the heart of at our next time. Any other last questions, thoughts? Sam, did I miss anything you want to make sure we say while we have everybody dutifully attending?
We appreciate everybody's comments today, and thank you. And I think, Chair, like you said, we'll be meeting up together in July. We will have probably some pretty packed conversations and information sharing as well. So as the Chair asked, make sure you do get some rest. So when we come back, we'll be pretty busy again.
All right. Enjoy the afternoon. Drink water. Stay cool. And we'll see you out on the driveway and in the meeting next. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.